Thomas Jefferson, one of our most well-known founding fathers, said, "When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. But when the government fears the people, there is liberty." The problem with ENDA is that it fosters government tyranny. Businesses, nonprofits, and even churches will find themselves the target of government-funded witch hunts for failing to hire not only those whose public behavior many consider immoral, but those who actively promote the forced acceptance of this behavior. When a homosexual, a transvestite, or cross-dresser you choose not to hire can make a simple phone call and sic the federal government on your small business or ministry, it creates certain levels of fear among employees and management alike. So ENDA brings with it a tremendous economic burden, and ultimately consumers like you and me will have to pay the price.
Well, ENDA is the latest effort on the part of the gay rights movement to establish a special right for homosexuals in the area of employment practices.
An employer who is covered by ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, would be required to hire a homosexual if they were otherwise superficially qualified, and if they didn't, they would be sued, could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages, and have to pay attorney's fees. Or if they have an employee who decides to come out as a homosexual and indicate that they're going to be an open homosexual on the workplace, and you decide that that's an inappropriate position to be filled by that person, any adverse decision, hiring or firing or failing to promote that person could result in a lawsuit and, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages.
This is an act that has been rejected multiple times in the past by Congress and the White House, but now for the first time it is poised to be passed. One of the controversial portions of ENDA has to do with its indoctrination into federal law of the notions of sexual orientation and gender identity. And when we come to understand what these phrases mean, we can see how dangerous of a law this is going to come to be.
But what ENDA would do would be to allow people to sue on the basis of perceived discrimination, not even overt discrimination. That is really getting us on a slippery slope in this country.
ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, by its own terms, affects every potential employer in this country. Of course, there are exceptions, they say, built into the law for religious organizations. I've scrutinized those and really feel that most of those are an illusion, they're a mirage. So an employer, Christian, faith-based, ministry, they all have to presume that they will probably come under ENDA, and as a result they'll have to scrutinize every single employment decision they make that may impact a person who is a homosexual or a lesbian or a transgender person.
And for the first time, we're looking at putting into federal law to protect in the workplace one's sexual preferences or sexual habits. Unlike race or gender or someone's deeply held religious beliefs, we're venturing into a very new category of protection in federal law, which we know infringes upon other people's rights that they have and cherish under our United States Constitution.
For example, we have a daycare center which has several hundred students in it every day, as well as the church, and we may hire 40 or 50 people just for the daycare. And in total, 60 to 75 employees on our overall ministry team. In these areas, we have an exposure that folks who don't understand our mission may say, "You're being discriminatory." But in reality, we want people to work for us who share our common vision of what the scripture says about lifestyle, morality, and sexuality.
Even if ENDA has all these religious exclusions, it's just a matter of time, because all they do is start saying, well, you're a hate monger, you're intolerant, so by all means the church should have to change too. So what's down the pike? And every discerning pastor knows this. Everyone who has at all their finger on the pulse of culture knows full well what's ahead, where we'd be forced to hire those that are homosexual to be even as associate pastors or pastors in our churches. That is a matter of time, and anybody who's in denial of that really is taking an ostrich approach. They're oblivious to the currents that are moving so rapidly.
The very first thing that any government legislation or regulation imposes on every organization subject to it is enormous cost burdens to comply with it. You've got to make sure that you're filling out all the right forms. You've got to make sure that you're dealing with the federal bureaucracy on every point. And so there's a compliance cost that's built into this. But the real cost is the cost of defending yourself against lawsuits if you assert that you have First Amendment freedoms that protect you from having to comply with these regulations.
You may have to look around the workplace and see posters that promote biblical views of marriage and decide whether or not you're going to keep those posters up because they would be deemed to be harassment against people who are homosexuals.
The saddest part about this legislation, I think, from just a due process standpoint, is that the burden of proof is on you as an employer that you haven't discriminated against the homosexual who's applied for work.
For-profit organizations where the CEO or the owner who has a Christian worldview or a faith-based approach to the place of employment is going to come under ENDA. They're going to be required, if they have 15 or more employees, to obey the prescriptions of ENDA, which means that they can't not hire homosexuals who are superficially qualified. They can't fire persons who come out in terms of their homosexuality in the workplace.
You know, on Capitol Hill, as we say, at the end of the day, ENDA and hate crimes are really a form of economic terrorism. They hold an extortion-like threat over your head and say that if you don't submit, you will pay for it in legal fees and in judgments and in pain and suffering in court for years to come. And some people will stand against that. Some people don't have the resources to stand against that. Others, sadly, are going to cut and run. And that is the great pity of the whole thing.
Thomas Jefferson said in his autobiography, "Were we directed from Washington when to sow and when to reap, we would soon want bread." This administration has already orchestrated ambitious federal takeovers of whole industries, the banking industry, the auto industry, and they're still attempting to take over the healthcare industry, not to mention energy industry through the cap-and-trade proposal. ENDA is yet another example of the federal government gone wild, imposing burdensome legislations on American businesses. Do we really need more government regulations? Put an end to ENDA. Go to frcaction.org.